Yeah, we are live. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone, depending where you are. Welcome to Connect Africa, to our Pan African media platform. As you can see, we started to see you here more often or during the week. So we are here on Monday. Yesterday, also, we were with you analyzing a follow up discussion on India, and today we are doing South Africa. So to do that, our own Kwame Gonza is here with us. We are going to analyze, the pressures, whether South Africa is under pressure, under too much pressure from the U.S.-led West, and what that like the background for that, and then other things to the future we will discuss. Welcome, Kwame.
Oh, thank you very much, Mahlet. Can you hear me very well?
Loud and clear. Yeah.
Oh, excellent, excellent. I want to greet everyone who's watching us all across the African continent and all across the world. I want to thank everyone who's supporting the channel. That is very, very important. That's extremely important that you support the channel and the work we are doing. And of course, we are seeing massive support from a lot of people who have decided to patronize the work we are doing. As we have mentioned in the past, we are not only here, but we are doing a lot of other things. As Mahlet, you put that, I think, in the chat and the comment section. People can reach out on our websites at connecttoafrica.org and africainterest.org. Those two websites, you can go out there. We are writing there, and we're having conversations on how to engage the other African heads of state on the continent and to link up the African civil society with the heads of state to support those leaders on the continent who are progressive. So that is on the side what we are doing. As Connect Africa, we are not just here to present. So that is the very reason why we are asking you, our viewers, and especially the Africans, that you should support the work which we are trying to do. As Mahlet has mentioned, we are here to discuss. We have seen South Africa, Madame Naledi Pandor and President Ramaphosa. He has been very vocal. South Africa has been very vocal in its foreign policy, and especially in defense of the African continent. So we want to see what is the position today. And of course, there has been a lot of pressure. These are the things which we want to examine today. With that being said, I want to thank you very much, all of you who are watching us, and I give you back the microphone, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame, indeed, for that. It's always important, yeah, to greet our viewers and then also to tell them what are the things we are doing beside coming here on this platform and talking. And that actually affirms why we came here today, although it's not our weekly session. It's because it's one of the things we do on the ground, like to strengthen the Pan-African leaders and to give us our support, the progressive Pan-African leaders, because that's our duty. So without further ado, let me just say a little of an intro or a background on what we are talking about today, and then I go straight to our first question tonight. As you may have noticed, South Africa has been under immense pressure for the past, maybe 3 years, since 2020 or 2021. I think ever since they took the leadership, they have been a chair of the African Union, and then there are things that they took a major action when they were a chair at the African Union for 1 year, basically actually saving or preventing historically Pan-African country, which happens to be a member state of the African Union and a founder of the African Union, from being dismantled by the US-led West pressure, the same things that they are facing right now, and that country is Ethiopia. What has been done, I think Kwame will go into it, and then also we have seen a pressure since the Ukraine-Russia war broke out because of their firm stance for not taking sides, while the US-led West we are really purposely, we are saying the US-led West. It's not for the lack of a better word, because it is how that is, because Europe is basically implementing what the US or the Washington office tells them. So yeah, because of their stance on the Ukraine-Russia war, and then recently because they are a host of the BRICS 2023 summit and related to the president of Russia, President Vladmir Putin's attendance and whether he's going to be arrested or not. All those things, are the background, but there are what really happened, what has been specifically the pressures. Those are the things we are going to go. So as a Pan-African media platform, we feel it's our duty to come in here to talk about it and to give our support and share our view and pass our message to Pan-Africans out there and African citizens and to our South African brothers and sisters. That's why we are here. So once again, thank you, Kwame, for initiating this and sparing your time again to give us all the knowledge based on research. So the first question, I think it will be really good for us to give us a background. Can you please outline for us what has been those pressures since 2021? Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, thank you, Mahlet. There's a lot of pressures on South Africa as a country, and those pressures are coming both from inside and outside. ANC is facing a lot of challenges internally, as you have seen in the media recently. There's been a lot of load shedding. They are facing power problems. During the times of, Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, they wanted, the ANC government wanted to build some nuclear power plants. And those nuclear power plants were going to be built by South Africa and Russia, together with Russia. And there was a lot of protests in South Africa. People were, demonstrating against it. And of course, some people say that it was instigated from outside because the project was being worked on between South Africa and Russia, because Russia was going to be part of it. And other people, they alleged that there was a lot of corruption in it. So that deal was cancelled. So now come 2022, the country starts experiencing power problems. And this is a country which depends mainly on industrialization, on industries and mining. So you can see that if power is affected, then it is a big problem. You have these load shedding, intermittent load shedding that is happening right now in the country, and it is affecting actually the economy, very, very much. And this is a very huge problem that the government, the ANC government, is grappling with, of course, under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa himself. And of course, this has led in certain cases the loss of support, in the voters, among the voters in South Africa, that to some extent EFF has gained ground. And on the other side, you have Democratic Alliance, which is the opposition party, the main opposition party. And of course, EFF is the most vocal, political party. Also, it has been gaining ground. So there has been that sort of loss of trust in the government. People saying that it is losing ground because it is failing to deliver for the people. So those are some of the internal pressures that you can speak of. Now, on the external front, when it comes to the foreign policy, which we are going to focus on very much. You remember that 2021, South Africa was the chair of the African Union, and President Ramaphosa was the chairperson, sort of the president of the African Union during that period, the chairperson of the African Union. As you know, for those people who are watching, there's a difference between the African Union and the African Union Commission. The chairperson of the African Union is normally a head of state from the continent. It is a rotating chair. And then the commission, the African Union Commission, that is the one led by Moussa Faki, His Excellency Moussa Faki. So there are two different things. That one I just wanted to make it clear. So South Africa was the chair in 2021. So it had the responsibility even when the conflict escalated in Ethiopia, whereby we had rebels in the northern part of Ethiopia, that when the United States wanted to overthrow the government in Ethiopia, President Cyril Ramaphosa saw it as his responsibility. Actually, they reached out to him and they said that they cannot refuse because they are the people who are chairing even the African Union currently. So they took that responsibility. And of course, the conflict was resolved until 2022, when these agreement was signed, the peace agreement was signed. So I think that to some extent, starting from that period, the United States saw it as a sabotage of it by South Africa, to a certain extent, because the United States was bent on overthrowing the government in Ethiopia, as many of you remember, many of people remember, that even the United States, which is based in Djibouti, of course, was threatening that if it is a military solution, they are ready to engage, and provide a military solution in Ethiopia, which Ethiopia did not ask them for any military solution. So this is where I believe that the challenges on the foreign, on the international stage started from that. South Africa committed itself to African solutions. If you remember the narrative of the African Union during that period, and of course the negotiations happened in South Africa. For those who are following what happened, so that time it was a successful, it was a victory for the African people. It was a victory for South Africa. Its position actually continued to be elevated on the global stage and also on the African continent. And then we see the leadership of President Ramaphosa also when it comes to COVID, which he mentioned even recently during the Paris new Global Financial Act, that he was there and still taking that leadership of complaining about the COVID, how Africa was mistreated. So all these, the United States has been seeing these instances. Now we have a situation where he was called to Washington. We saw that this was, the pressure now was being elevated, to certain levels, which we are seeing that started becoming almost unbearable. We saw President Ramaphosa was invited to Washington by Biden, and from there we see again Blinken, after visiting Asia, he came to South Africa, where he left, and then he gave his speech on Biden's policy towards Africa, which he gave, I think it was in Pretoria. Then he left there and he went to Rwanda and then went to the Democratic Republic of Congo, of course. But this was the pressure which we were seeing. And immediately Blinken had left. Then Janet Yellen also came, who is the Secretary of Treasury of the United States. So all these, you can see that they were tremendous pressures that they were putting on South Africa. And on the other side, of course, you've mentioned the BRICS summit, which is happening in South Africa. There has been that attempt to try to discourage South Africa from holding the BRICS. Even to some extent, you could hear in the media, in the mainstream media, those rumors that would the summit happen. The summit happened. Other people were putting doubt. South Africa might, renege on the responsibility of hosting the BRICS summit. But South Africa, the government, the ANC government, has insisted that the summit will happen. So all these have been, strategies of pressurizing Africa, and of course with the false accusation of South Africa that it was supplying weapons to ANC, which was a false accusation by the United States ambassador, in South Africa, to the point that he had to come out and apologize. And yet he had said that he would put his life on it, that the weapons were supplied. There was no weapons, but as we know, this is the same situation with what happened in Iraq and all the other countries which have been attacked. These accusations have been starting in such a manner. So these are all the pressures we have seen that they have continued to mount threats. Of course, they started with convincing South Africa and it refused, and then so they are trying to remove it from the position which it was holding actually on behalf of Africa, because President Ramaphosa, when he was invited to Washington, they invited him ahead of the US-Africa summit. So South Africa was seen as a leader, and also the fact that he was the immediate chair of the African Union. The immediate chair of the African Union holds a lot of power still on the continent. You can see that when it is about representing the continent outside, normally the chairperson, the current chairperson normally goes with the previous chairperson of the African Union. So he was still holding that much importance on the continent. And of course, we know also that South Africa is one of the biggest economies on the continent. So it puts South Africa in that important position whereby it has to be, they have to seek it in every way to try to convince it, because they know that if they convince South Africa or if they blackmail it into submission, then majority of the other African countries will be able to submit.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good that you kind of built up where the pressure started internally, which I kind of completely forgot about the load shedding. And then on the foreign policy from 2020, actually before Ramaphosa, and then up until now. Now that you have laid out those pressures, let's talk about the current situation in which we kind of observe it in the past few days, in less than a week. Two extreme positions by South Africa. One was where we observed President Ramaphosa of South Africa coming out and telling us, actually, in his own words, sorry to disappoint, but BRICS meeting will not be virtual. And he knows exactly who is going to be disappointed by this. And then after a couple of days, the vice president comes out and tells us, oh, South Africa have requested for the foreign minister of Russia to attend instead of the president, so that they avoid that confrontation with the United States. From where this stems from? I mean, maybe can you tell us the current situation of the ANC in general, and particularly why they are behaving in such a way?
Yeah, so the position is a little bit confusing, if you look at it but I think the best place to look at is what has the government said consistently. This is where you want to look at consistency. What has been the consistent position of the government? Of course, these may be tactical issues. As you see, some of the government officials in the past were coming out and saying the BRICS summit may not be held in South Africa. Some people were saying, even I think people like Mbeki, the former president, Mbeki was mentioning that South Africa might not hold the BRICS summit for reasons because they don't want to arrest Putin. But the government in South Africa has this commitment towards BRICS, and he doesn't want to break it, because now remember that this year is the theme for this year's BRICS summit is BRICS and the African continent. So that is the theme. So South Africa now has the responsibility towards the whole continent. It cannot disappoint the continent, and then it cannot be weak. It cannot show weakness. And so we see that amidst all this pressure, I think that it may be a tactical point. There's some confusion, which you can say that certain government officials have been saying certain things. But I think the best place to look is the president himself and all the historical position. What has the position been since 2021 regarding these matters? If you look at South Africa, it has held the position consistently and refused to give in to the pressure. That the rhetoric of defending Africa and self-determination, that rhetoric, has been ramped up. If you listen to President Ramaphosa himself, and you listen even to Madame Naledi Pandor, who is the Minister of Foreign Relations, has been ramping up the rhetoric of working with Africa, self-determination, the right to choose friends. You see that this rhetoric has been ramped up, very much. So I believe that regardless of the pressures which are there, it may be a tactical move, as you mentioned, to try to convince the enemy. But I think they are still holding at the same position that the summit must be held, and it will not be virtual. People have to attend. And look at also in the past, they lifted, they put up the more diplomatic immunity to all the people who are going to attend the summit, the officials who are going to attend the summit. So this tells you that the position is still there, that President Putin might attend the summit and in person, even though these other things they may say all these other things to the media in one way or the other, like how we had it on WION, which is an Indian media house. Of course, we don't know how they got this, but that's where we had it from.
Yeah.
So it may be there, that thing may be there, but I think what is at stake with holding, since it is even the first time this summit is coming to Africa, what is at stake really is so much that they cannot put off this summit, and they cannot stop President Putin from coming. So I think South Africa will have to bear all the pressures, and even after the summit, if President Putin has left after the summit, and of course South Africa will know how to deal with the pressures and the consequences of that.
Thank you, Kwame, for that. Indeed, trying to give us actually. So from what you said, and I think this is what I believe, it's like a face value, just for them to be okay. They have requested Russia for Putin not to attend the summit, instead the foreign minister. But if he had immunity, I mean, it's such a confusion. Let me just leave it there. Yeah, and as you said, the fact that it's not covered even by their own that match, maybe that says also something. Now, let's go to what will happen if whatever they fear happens, meaning President Putin attends the BRICS summit in August in South Africa, because this is not the first time the foreign minister, Madame Naledi Pandor, have talked about it, that sanctions. So it kind of foretells that you have also said it in our previous discussion, maybe sanction is somewhere around the corner. It's not for nothing that they are talking about. And this has been also, a known and a cliche, for somehow a known tool for the US to apply when you are firm and you have that Pan-African spirit. So if he attends and a sanction follows or applied against or on South Africa, then how do you view, or how do you think that South Africa will respond?
I think that the South Africa has a lot of businesses, United States businesses, and of course that is the fear which many even economists have spoken about, that South Africa has a lot of much more business with the United States compared to Russia. But I think what is at stake here is the question of sovereignty, and also the moral issue. I think South Africa's position is much more moral if you look at its support of the cause of the Palestinian people, who are being brutalized by apartheid Israel. South Africa has voiced this in broad daylight, even at the United Nations. If you look at the speech by Madame Naledo Pando, which she gave last year when she attended the United Nations General Assembly. So I think it is a question of morality and self-determination. As you know, the ANC still has roots of a revolutionary organization, which came, to power after fighting against apartheid. So that, those roots are still existent in the organization. So the resistance, that is the resistance which we are seeing that is manifesting even right now, that they hold a position regardless of the cost. So it is likely, of course, that the United States can impose the sanctions. But I think if the United States imposes sanctions, it risks alienating the African continent. And it risks
Kwame,
causing much more
I
problems.
don't want to interrupt, but I
think
have
that
to
the United
interrupt.
States will not be able to do this, regardless of what happens
Kwame,
in South Africa. And the United States, can you hear me, Mahlet?
I hear you, but I am going to interrupt you because we see you like on the
Okay,
side.
so let me set it up a little bit more.
Okay, please. Okay, that's a technical problem. So Kwame will join us in a few seconds. Just tune in and wait. So probably I'm going to read some of the comments here. Aaron, Black, Macbeb, welcome to Connect Africa. I read your comments. Probably, Aaron, I think it's you who asked the question. At the end of the session, if we have time, we always try to address our viewers' comments and questions. So we will try to do that. So just tune in and wait. Until Kwame joins us, I think what we can do is he has a technical problem with his device, but it will be okay. Let me hear from you. What do you think the pressure that has been imposed on South Africa since 2020 or 2021, both internally and externally, stems from? What do you think the background, in your view? So please share your thoughts in the chat sections, and perhaps if there's anything that we have not covered, so maybe we take your thoughts or your comments and discuss on it further. So Aaron's question is, don't you think that the so-called white South Africans are part of the pressure? It might be. Why not? I mean, we all know their history and the history of apartheid. And perhaps they are serving as a tool for whatever the West is doing there. So welcome, Kwame, again.
Sorry, there was some technical problems.
Yeah, we understand.
Someone was worrying my call, but I hope we are okay now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we are. So I was just reading from the comment section, and they know they are informed that it's a technical problem. So let's continue from where you stopped. So you were addressing the parts that if sanctions up, if President
Yes. So
Putin,
yeah. So if sanctions are applied, which I don't think that the United States will do, because it risks alienating the African continent if it tries to apply sanctions on South Africa because of inviting President Putin to South Africa, I think it will be looked at as an all-out war against the African continent. And if those sanctions are applied, which I don't think are going to be applied, it is the United States which is going to lose the most. Why? Because South Africa has been laying the groundwork already, preparing for such scenarios. And I'll take you through it, how it has been preparing. And of course, this is in addition to the problems. These preparations have been in addition to the problems which, of course, it is facing internally. The economic problems it has, before the electricity problems, load shedding in the country, it already had economic problems, a slowly growing economy. Economy is very slow. And people also have been demanding, the return of the land from the whites, the minority whites in South Africa. And of course, this is something also which Floyd Mayweather, the boxer, when he came to South Africa yesterday, he was doing a media, and he spoke about it. He was doing an interview with the media in South Africa. He spoke about it, that Africans have to take back, my people have to take back the resources and the land. Why these people still have, ownership of the land which belongs to the African people? So that question of the land also is there. So these preparations which South Africa has been making, I see them as part of the solution to what is coming, because people have been demanding for the land in the past, and also the EFF has promised the people that if it comes to power, it will take back the land by force and give it back to the Africans. So the ANC actually spoke about it a little bit, even in Parliament. They started to speak about it. So I believe that it is also trying to prepare for that, eventuality. And the United States also fears this, that if it applies sanctions, the only way for South Africa to live itself will be to take back the land and give it to the people so that they can be busy and not worry it a lot. Now, on the other side, the preparations that have been made is that you have seen South Africa invite various regional leaders. Of course, it consolidated its position in the region when we talk about Zimbabwe, Botswana. All these are sort of like satellites, or they are extensions of South Africa. When you talk of Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, all these, they are like extensions of South Africa. So it is dominant in that area. Now, it has been bringing in all the other far regional countries, economic, powerhouses like Kenya, for example. You remember President Ramaphosa visited Kenya. So after visiting Kenya by himself, whereby agreements were MOUs were signed with President Ruto, they spoke about unifying South African Airways and Kenya Airways to have a Pan-African airline, to find a way of having a Pan-African airline. So Pan-Africanism sort of has been resurgent in a way. Now, after that, he invited President Museveni, and the Ugandan economy also has been growing very fast. And South Africa also has a lot of investments. In South Africa, you can talk of MTN, you can talk of DSTV and all the other mining companies. There's a lot of companies which are attached to the oil industry in Uganda, which are from South Africa, and invited the Ugandan president to talk about business, and of course to talk about revolutionary stuff. If you listen to the conversation which they were having with President Museveni, they were talking about the colonial system. The neo-colonial system has failed, just like how slavery and colonialism failed. So it would tell you some of the things they spoke about. They did not only stop at speaking about business, with the fact that they should increase business, because if you listen to Museveni himself, they pointed out that they are trying to map out industries where Uganda will collaborate extensively, even though there's already business. They want to increase it, to collaborate extensively with South Africa. For example, the supply of coal to Uganda, which wants to start mining its bauxite and making steel. So they want to get that call from South Africa, for example. And then, of course, they spoke about what I was coming to, the revolutionary aspect of it, the fact that they have to work more closely together. And President Museveni was saying that these young people who are trying to carry out sort of some revolutionary activities, we can support them. We should support them so that they can be able to protect the continent. So you could hear that revolutionary conversation coming up. And of course, a lot of things were spoken about in that aspect, of course. And what I said that Museveni said, that the colonial system failed, the neo-colonial system has also failed of just coming to kill off leaders, which is something which I want us also to talk about sometime, whether the neo-colonial system of killing off leaders is sustainable anymore, or is failing even right now, like what Museveni mentioned and said. And after inviting President Museveni of Uganda, President Suluhu was invited of Tanzania. So you can see all this is sort of like President Ramaphosa is repeating what President Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia was doing during the period when Ethiopia was going through a crisis. You could see the Prime Minister Abiy going across East Africa and mobilizing the countries. So President Suluhu also was invited to South Africa. And of course, business was spoken about and all the other issues, geopolitical issues. So I believe that he's trying to consolidate all this region, South and North and East and even Central. If you see recently, South Africa has been in the central part of the continent. They went to Cameroon. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was in Cameroon, Madame Mahlet, and then they went to Democratic Republic of Congo, where President Cyril Ramaphosa himself has been, where they held South Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo Business Forum. And on this, President Cyril Ramaphosa gave a very strong speech, which was also in support of the Inga Dam, which he spoke about during the Paris New Global Financial Pact. They spoke about the Inga, the construction of the Inga Dam, which is a project of around $80 billion. And he said that they are going to cooperate, South Africa is going to cooperate with the Democratic Republic of Congo to mobilize resources and be able to build this infrastructure, because this infrastructure will be able to provide more than 20% of the energy needs of the African continent. And South Africa also wants to use some of that energy. He mentioned it, President Ramaphosa. So these are all for me, when I analyze as a Pan-Africanist, if I look at it, it tells me that they are preparing for any eventualities, and they are preparing for any threats which have been coming. Of course, those threats of sanctions, that if they happen, they already have where to hold on. They have space. They have support within the region, that those sanctions, they will not mean anything. Like how you see countries like Zimbabwe, that Zimbabwe sanctions were put, but because they had the support of South Africa, then they have been able to stand. The government, has been able to stand, because you have to remember the purpose of sanctions is to help to overthrow, to speed up the overthrow of a government. It's not to do anything. It's to annoy the people who are in the country, the citizens of the country, so that they can be angry with their government and overthrow it. That is the purpose of the government. I mean, that's the purpose of the sanctions. So any wise leader would be doing what South Africa is doing to the end. That is exactly what I'm saying that they are doing today. So if they are not doing it for the sake of sanctions, they are trying to mobilize the continent to take back the land and give it back to the people in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Kwame.
Yeah, because if you take back the land also, remember that will also come with sanctions. Because you remember what happened to Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe took back the land, during President Mugabe's time, and gave it back to the Africans, and they ejected the whites, who were trying to cling onto the land which doesn't belong to them. The same situation which is happening in South Africa, that the whites are clinging onto, the colonial whites, the settlers, are clinging onto the land which they did not come with, and they are claiming that they are supposed to be compensated. Yet they came and killed our people to take this land. Now we want to take it, and they are saying they need compensation, as if they compensated us for the people they killed. So If you want
So
to take
let
back
me
that land,
allow me to ask a question that, in a layman mind. Now, people think when we talk about Zimbabwe and South Africa, always about taking back the land from the white minority. I mean, it's a black country. The president is the leadership is a black government. Then what is so difficult to take a land back?
yeah. So the why it is difficult is because a majority of the South African economy, as you know, is owned from outside. The investments are controlled from outside. If you look at countries like MTN, if you go and examine the owners of that company, people are sitting in Canada, sitting in the US, people are sitting in London. They are the ones who own those organizations, and of course the Africans, they own some share in them. If you look at companies like EBSA or Barclays Bank, Standard Bank, which is called the Stanbic Bank in other countries of the African continent, all of them, even though they are painted as if they are from Africa and South Africa, they are not from South Africa. They are majority of the people who own them, or majority shareholders of these companies, they are from Canada, the US, and Europe. And of course, the example is MultiChoice, which is the owner of DSTV. You remember that even though that company is paraded as a South African company across the African continent, the owners are in Europe. And to show you, they imposed the sanctions. When they imposed the sanctions on Russia, they banned this MultiChoice DSTV from broadcasting RT News, Russia Today, RT News, which comes from Russia. They stopped DSTV from showing that. If it was owned by South Africans, they will not do that, as you have seen their position on the Ukraine issue. But because it is owned from outside, so it would bite. The sanctions would bite a little bit if you took back the land, and especially if you did not mobilize the African continent. And that is where it is very important. If South Africa wants to take back the land, it has to mobilize the African continent, all of it to be behind. In the same way that Zimbabwe has been supported by South Africa and the neighboring countries, is the same way South Africa needs the majority of the rest of the continent in order to be able to survive these sanctions. Because if you take it, you know that these whites are going to put sanctions, these whites from Europe and the United States, Anglo-Saxons, because they feel entitled to African property and resources. So they will impose those sanctions, and you need, a fallback plan. You need a support. So that support can only come by mobilizing the whole of Africa. You have to mobilize the whole of Africa to be at your back, and I think that is what the government is doing right now.
So can we say that South Africa is somehow in it more sounds like the 14 Western African countries who signed that deal and stuck with France. So that thought actually inspired now by the last comment I'm reading here, Fred Bantu, where he or she says South Africa is stuck. They signed a constitution that binds them to the old system where colonizers own the land. So can we say South Africa is in the same situation with the 14 Western African countries?
Yeah, so it is in a very difficult situation, actually. For me, I even applaud South Africa. I applaud the ANC. I know, of course, this could be controversial in the eyes of South Africans who are really feeling that they are facing a very difficult situation. But you want to applaud it for even putting up a fight that it is putting up right now and holding the position it is holding right now, because it doesn't control majority of the economy. The South African government doesn't have access, the ability of controlling. It gets everything from these capitalists, majority of them who are Western. So you can see that it is difficult. It is a difficult situation. An example is that the United States alone has more than 400 companies in South Africa. Ford is there, and all the other Anglo-American, which are in the mining sector. So they are controlling a majority of the economy. De Beers, who is also in Botswana. So all these guys are there. So they have the chokehold on the economy. They have the chokehold on the land. So it is very difficult. And these contracts, of course, these agreements were signed during the end of apartheid. These were some of the conditionalities which were agreed on by President Nelson Mandela, and that is why maybe some people look at him as someone who sold the country which belongs to the people. But I think his vision was that they had fought to that level. The next generation will continue also the struggle from there. What they did not want is they did not want the white to go out of the country with all their money. I think there was that fear during that period that they will just run away, because during even that period, there's some whites who say that if a black president comes, they will leave the country and go to Australia and go back to Europe. And of course, some of them went. So there was a little bit of that fear that the economy will collapse if the whites are left to go. So, and then, of course, the whole African continent is always talking about attracting investment. So that was the fear during that period. So it was a concession. That issue of land was a concession which they agreed to. And of course, it shows that this was a mistake. Today, it is showing you that it was a mistake, which has to be corrected. And that is the struggle which is going on right now inside South Africa.
Very interesting. I just added here in the below where Fred Bantu said the same people are not letting go of the stolen art, meaning our stolen arts in Europe. Do you think they will let go of a stolen land? I mean, well said. Yeah.
I think the time will come and they will have to leave the land. So I think it will reach a time whereby the ANC, if it doesn't take back the land, is going to be removed from power. And I think it has noticed that already, because I told you that last year they started speaking about it, the issue of taking back the land. The ANC itself started having conversations about that issue.
Yeah, because it's like a sacred issue.
Yes, because if they don't do it, EFF is gaining ground and is coming with these promises of taking back the land and giving it back to the people by force, without compensation. So if you are seeing this threat that you may be removed from power, then you have to find solutions to the consequences, the likely consequences of you taking back the land, and of course, which is the sanctions from the whites and the Anglo-Saxons from all over the world, who think that they are still entitled to Africa's resources and property.
Thank you very much, Kwame, really, for those, for making time also to address the extended question that arise from your own answer, and then from the comments. Now let's go to the why. Now, if one wants to name this whole thing that has been imposed on an ongoing basis on South Africa, can we say that this is a strategy to break BRICS, or is there something else, and possibly a potential of BRICS currency? What can we make out of all these things that has been applied on South Africa?
Yeah, well, yeah, it could be, in one way, it could be, to try to break BRICS. Because now, since the BRICS summit is in South Africa this year, so South Africa now is being looked at as the center of BRICS operations. You see, because the BRICS summit will be in South Africa this year. And a lot of countries have applied. So this is a deliberate strategy to try to break BRICS. And when it comes to de-dollarization, which we have spoken about here extensively, and I would encourage those people who are watching to go out in our videos, which we have done. Many of them have been speaking about the BRICS issue and the dollarization issue. South Africa is also at the center when it comes to matters as this. South Africa is a signatory to the Pan-African payment system and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which also is about de-dollarization. So when you combine these, and if you look at how the United States has been behaving, whereby India came out to to try to distance itself from the BRICS currency. It would be a strategy. You could look at it and conclude that it is a strategy by the United States to try to break up BRICS. If you look at what has been happening, which we spoke about, the allegation, the attempted blackmailing of South Africa, and claiming and slandering it that it was supplying weapons to Russia. All these are tactics. The inviting of President Ramaphosa to Washington, these were attempted threats. They are trying to threaten South Africa. So all these, you consider their strategies to break up, BRICS itself, and even, to try to see how you can stop the formation of the BRICS currency, and also to weaken it, to show the world that this is weak. The organization is weak. So that you can weaken the idea of the BRICS currency, because as you remember, the United States Congress held a hearing. The Committee on Finance, Finance in the United States Congress had a hearing on the de-dollarization and how they should maintain the dollar as the dominant reserve currency, because its reserve status has been reducing, drastically from 75 to now less than 55%, of global reserve currency, and the Chinese has been gaining, relatively. But majority of the countries across the globe, they have been worried of holding the dollar because of the behavior of the United States. So it could be a strategy, because now this group of countries, which have Russia, India, and China, of course, China and Russia, which are very formidable. And if you add South Africa and you add Brazil, Brazil's current president doesn't give a damn about the United States. Yes. So it is a very powerful group right now that you cannot treat it. And what is very tragic for them is that you cannot treat it like how you treated Iraq. You cannot treat it like how you treated Afghanistan and Libya, who wanted to de-dollarize and abandon the dollar. You cannot treat them like that. You cannot go and bomb them. They are very powerful. So the only way to do it is to try some sabotaging tactics and see whether they will succeed. So this is what we are seeing right now that is happening.
Interesting. Thank you, Kwame, for that again. Now that, as we said in the beginning, we have come to the last part of our conversation, as we always try like to conclude our discussion by giving it that Pan-African perspective. Our very aim, our very goal, our very duty to be on this platform is to deliver that, so to give it a Pan-African perspective. Until now, what we have done is, because it's a research-based discussion, we give you the background and the whole process, and the in the future, what if this happens, what can be done. Now, as an African and a Pan-Africanist, what is the message that you would like to give for our, as you said, supporting ANC could be controversial, but because of the expectation from the South Africans. So what is your message for South Africans and for the South African government, ANC, who's dealing this right now? And then to the general African citizens in terms of, supporting and strengthening South Africa as a whole. It's Pan-African duty. It might not be satisfied internally. They might not meet their expectation. But yeah, what will be your message?
My message to all the other Africans, and especially the Africans in South Africa, I think that our continent is going through tremendous, changes. Mm-hmm. The whole world is going through a lot of changes, and we need to pay close attention to the changes which are going on across the globe, because we as Africans also must play within those changes. The challenges are there in South Africa, many challenges, but I guarantee you the government in South Africa, the ANC government, even if it is the EFF, it comes to power, it will not be able to solve these problems. Even if it's the Democratic Alliance, which is of course white-backed, which is sort of like a colonial-backed government, party, if it came to power, it will only be able to hold on for a short while, and you will get small relief, but it will not be able to solve these problems. The only solution which can be able to come for us as Africans is to work together, because if you look at what is happening in South Africa, the challenges, those challenges are not different from what is happening in Ghana. When you come to Ghana, inflation is skyrocketing. When you go to Kenya, people are in the streets demonstrating. So these problems are all over Africa, the African continent. And why? It is because we do not control our economies as Africans. You have seen the IMF coming back in a major way. All these are exploitation tactics that are being hatched right now to continue the exploitation of the African continent. So I think that as Africans, and with special emphasis on the South African citizens, especially because we are talking about South Africa today, I think that they need to be a little bit patient, because the South African government itself has been trying on one side, and you can see that it has been helping the African continent. We've mentioned here from how it helped Ethiopia to settle, the problems. You can see how the Minister of Foreign Affairs and President Ramaphosa himself has been trying to open up opportunities so that there can be more engagement across the African continent in terms of investment. So these are all solutions which are being looked at. So what I would ask and plead with everyone is to look at our continent in all of it, and stop looking at only South Africa, and stop looking at only Kenya, and stop looking at only Ghana, looking at Uganda, or looking at Egypt or Algeria or Tunisia, and look at the whole continent. This whole continent belongs to you. This whole continent belongs to us, all of us, and we have to work it. Like Hugh Masekela, before he died, Hugh Masekela, who was a prominent South African, a musician, very popular one, he said that Africans have to realize that they are the same people, and we have to agree that we have to work this continent together. He actually did not say only Africans on the continent, but he said all Africans across the world, including those in Jamaica, including those the so-called African Americans who are Africans in America, including everyone else, those in Brazil. Because if you put us together, we are much more.
Yeah.
Of course, one person will say, how can I wait for until that period? And that is where I'm saying that we need to be patient, and in that patience also we need to engage the leaders themselves and find out what they are doing, because we have seen that in many cases we don't know what these guys are doing. But if we try to engage, if we form coalitions or groups, and we have leaders as citizens on the African continent, and we reach out to these people and ask them, what are you people doing about the situation? Of course, there's some good leaders on the African continent. I'm not saying all of them are good on the African continent, and we should be patient with them. But there is certain good leaders, as we have analyzed for you, that South Africa has really been putting in work for the African continent, not only for South Africa, but it has been putting in work for the African continent. And this needs to be appreciated, regardless of whether you agree with the policies that are in South Africa, or the policies which are in Kenya, which we are going to come here and talk about also, because Kenya is also facing a lot of challenges. President Ruto, even though he has put up a very good fight for the African continent, is facing numerous changes, at home. But if you see these challenges, they did not start today. Even when we go back to great African leaders like Nkrumah, they faced the same challenges. While Nkrumah was fighting on the front for the African continent to unify it, for the African continent to unify it, at home, he was facing numerous challenges and opposition, to the point that people overthrew him. You see, so, and what came after that? They regretted. Later, people regretted, why did we overthrow a great leader? So this is where it requires us to work together as Africans and see how we can strategize to take all the continent and kickstart its process of rapid industrialization and rapid reconstruction as Africans, all of us working together, because that is the only solution that is going to take us out of the mess. You know, these particular political parties here and there can come now and then, but they are not going to solve Africa's problems. Africa's problems are going to be solved by its unification. So we should support those people who are at the forefront of seeing that Africa unifies, so that we all as Africans can take back the control of our lands, our resources, and then rebuild Africa as a people, as a group of people together. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much indeed, Kwame. We've just finished exactly at 1:00, at 1 hour, but that's not really that much important. But thank you very much the way you gave that powerful speech, and for us also to reminding us what really the leaders or the political parties. Of course, if the leader is a progressive leader, a Pan-African leader, it matters, so that he or she can be able to embrace his or her people and embrace that Pan-Africanism, and then take his or her nation to the necessary step, meaning towards African unity. And of course, I just want to strengthen what you said. It's an interesting comparison that you have made. We did not even realize it, although we lived it. What Prime Minister Abiy has been trying to do when Ethiopia was under during that wartime and are under immense pressure by the US-led West. And then now the same thing, although South Africa is not really in a war in a sense, on a battleground, but they are in a war on media, and we are seeing different and hearing different kinds of things. So to go to those neighboring countries, and also actually to Central Africa now, to West Africa, East Africa, inviting them and then going, that is, you can see that they are doing the necessary work to have that support. And I can assure you what during the 35th AU Ordinary Summit of the presidents, what the Prime Minister of Ethiopia said is that if, I really like this statement, it was a powerful speech, but this one really hit me, and it was reality. If it was not for our brothers and sisters in Africa, both at home and abroad, we would, meaning Ethiopia, we would have not survived. Ethiopia would be in a different place. So that's giving that recognition. It was really important, and we want to pass that message also to our fellow brothers and sisters in South Africa.
Yes, absolutely, and of course, this does not mean that when you go out to mobilize, it doesn't mean that you have solved the problems. But there is a recognition even right now among African leaders, and that recognition is what Nkrumah spoke about in 1963 and 1950s, that there's nothing we can do in our single state to develop Africa. We have to build Africa as a unit. We have to work together, all of us. We have to unify under one government, and then start building Africa, all of us, and unleash Africa's potential, economic potential, without the interference of the external powers. So I think there is some sort of a realization of that fact. If you look at the meetings, the AU meetings that have been happening in Nairobi, for example, recently, and it's very good that people like President Ruto have taken a very strong, firm position. But there's a realization of that. So it tells you that majority of the leaders have noticed that what you can do right now as a single state, as a single African state, is only to survive. It's survival, but not thriving. You can only survive in this current situation, this neo-colonial dispensation. But you will not be able to, to thrive. The only way to thrive and unleash Africa's potential and have the lives of the African people improve like 1,000-fold or 100-fold is for us to unify Africa and unleash its full potential in industrialization, and all economic potential, infrastructure, because these are the ones which are going to create millions of jobs for the African people when we are working together. But if we continue to work in our corners, then we are going to continue to be beggars, and be begging other people to come and invest in our continent. And yet we have already the capital, which we have already spoken about here consistently. We have more than $3.5 trillion as GDP if it is combined. But if it is not combined, then it is useless. And countries like India, even, which we have more GDP than, our GDP is more than that of India. If you look at it, they will continue to summon us. Why? Because we are not realizing that we have something that can be used, to catapult us so that we can compete with the rest of the world. And even weak countries like Turkey, you see that Turkey was able to put up Turkey Africa Summit, but Turkey, its economy is not even up to 1 trillion. But Africa's economy is 3.5 trillion. Turkey's economy is around $700 billion. But why would Turkey invite really Africa? What is it that Turkey should invite Africa about? So these are the problems which we can solve if we are working together as Africans. But I think that some African leaders, there's a recognition of that fact, and those leaders, I think they need our support, who are putting up a very good fight against imperialism, because our greatest enemy on this continent is imperialism.
I would not add anything on that. I will just let that sink in. Okay. Yeah. So as we always do, we give few minutes. We started to do this now as a custom for us to give some few minutes to our viewers who are commenting here and asking questions. Let me just read some of them, and you come in, Kwame, if you want to react. So while we had that small technical problem, I asked our viewers here, to give us, their view, what they think about this pressure. Where does it come from on this internal and external pressure on South Africa? So Gash Girmay or Girmay Haile has shared his view. So it says externally, external close proximity to the Western Empire, support to the white community to sustain their economic dominance, manipulation of land and productivity, played into a regional watchdog. Let me just, he also wrote one internally. He wrote democracy deficit, sense of betrayal of the poor and black, economic infiltration by external players, powerful non-state players, and capital flight. So this is what he shared. I think he nailed it. And Aaron, in the beginning, he asked, don't you think that the so-called white South Africans are part of the pressure? I think you have mentioned this, you have discussed it.
Yeah, of course they are part of the pressure. They are, because they don't want to release the land, and they work together, of course, with the United States, and all of them, they work together. Don't think that they are alone. Those whites in South Africa, they are like a Trojan horse for the Anglo-Saxons, to hold on to Africa's resources. They are just a Trojan horse that is being used by the Anglo-Saxons to continue to hold on to the resources in South Africa, especially the mining, in gold, platinum, and all the others. So they are just being used, as a bargaining chip. So that is just an excuse. You would say that they always want to use that, because they know that if you remove them from the land, then of course the influence of the United States and Europe on South Africa is going to be reduced drastically, and the blacks and the Africans in South Africa will continue to make gains, will make drastic gains within the economy, and the United States will lose influence. And of course, these processes might accelerate the process of unifying Africa into a single continent and into a single country.
Thank you. Another one is it's just a comment. Was it Fred Bond? No, Macbeth said billions, 1.4 plus billions Africans desert permanent seats in the Security Council. Yes, we do believe that. Yeah, so CNS said lots of respect to South Africa for standing her ground despite the maximum pressure campaign from the collective West. Yes, they do deserve that respect. And of course, part of it, us being here is to honor that and then to encourage that Pan-African leadership and to show our support. And wherever you are, I think share this message. Unless there is a closing remark or anything you want to say, Kwame, I think that's it for us. Thank you very much. Really, as always, as usual, an interesting discussion, very informative, insightful, and we're happy. We're really happy when we bring you here. And of course, I'm grateful and thank you, Kwame. Kwame is part of Connect Africa, but still we need to thank him for his time. It's all his passion that brings him here. Although we have twice a week, but whenever there is something, we say let's do it. So thank you, Kwame. What else I wanted to say? So tomorrow is Tuesday, so it's our weekly session every Tuesday and Thursday. Tomorrow we are going to cover for you about President Ruto and in general Kenya. So their move, including the speech that has been made in the ongoing AU summit. And what he's basically walking the talk. President William Ruto needs to be protected by all means and needs to be supported. Until tomorrow. Bye and thank you very much. But before that, please, as soon as this stream is over, please share this video to don't keep the knowledge, the information only to yourself. So please go and share it widely. If you like it, of course, go and give it thumbs up and then share it to your network, to all the people that you think will be interested. And if you want us to support us further, also, you can find in the description section our PayPal account, so that will help us to be here consistently in a various way. Thank you very much. So until tomorrow, ciao. Bye. Thank you, Kwame.